All right. Thanks again for everybody coming. Got another great turnout this year. This year we're going to talk about some of the new V5 features. We got Ryan Woody here who's going to give me a break and do the speaking. He's going to talk specifically about the traction control that's integrated into the Holley, as well as some of the new injector strategies for either a single set or 2 or 3 sets. And then at the end we're going to have Tom Keiss talk about some of the training opportunities down in Bowling Green. So I'm going to hand it off to Ryan here. And, thank you.
Give me 1 second, I just got to get the recording started. All right, welcome everyone. As Doug said, I'm going to talk about injector strategies and traction control today. With V5 that's been out since the spring, we decided to change things up and add a few new ways for you to use multiple injectors in the software. Let's get right into it and just talk about some of the new features and what they are. Did we lose the screen? There we go. So one of the things we did was we went and added an entirely new section to the injection type called Custom that allows you to configure multiple injector sets and multiple fuel tables, where previously you only had the option to stage a second set of injectors based on duty cycle. So in the past you would go here and set a duty cycle for activation, and we would linearly ramp in the fuel between the first and second sets. Now with the custom type you can go between 1, 2, or 3 injectors and then configure the sets independently. You have sets 1 and 2 here. You can set your firing strategy for sequential, untimed sequential, batch, or bank. When you're using something other than sequential, you can select the number of injectors on that set. So for sets 1, 2, and 3, you could have anywhere from 1, 2, 4, or 8 for each set, which gives you a total of 24 injectors possible. From there, it's more of the normal. You just select your injector type. We have all the normal things that have been here: rated fuel flow, rated pressure. Something that's new is the driver setup on the first set of injectors only. What that allows you to do is, depending on your injector, you can select a saturated 4-in-1 or 8-in-2. We also have a custom option, and that is mostly for the 700-pound injector. In the past, you'd have to set up 3 injector sets to get an 8-in-2 amp drive. So if you're running a single set of 700-pound injectors, you had to kludge some things together and run 3 injectors. Tell the computer you're running 3 injectors. Now you no longer need to do that. All you do is set up 1 injector set, select the 700-pound drop down, and it will automatically set up your peak and hold currents for you, and you're done. I mean, it's that simple now. With the second set, you do not have a driver setup. That's because we require you to use an injector driver externally. What we do is we have taken the outputs on the J2 and repurposed them to be inputs to the injector driver box. This gives you full sequential control with 16 injectors and allows you to use the fuel tables any way you want to phase in, phase out fuel, which I'll show you in a few minutes here. The other new parameters that come from this are the use for section. Because we allow you to use each injector set in however you choose effectively, we allow you to use each set for the prime shot or not, the cranking fuel, as well as individual cylinder correction. Important note on that is if you don't turn on the use for cranking fuel and set it to something other than 0, your car won't start because you have no cranking fuel. Another thing to note is we allow you to set it to 100% on each injector set. So if you have 3 injector sets and you set all of them for 100%, you'll actually end up with 300% of the cranking fuel value. So that is something to keep in mind. So as part of that, as I said, we have multiple tables. We still use the traditional base fuel table, and this is your total fuel value in either VE, pound per hour. And then we also have multiple tables, one for each injector set. So in this case, we have 2 sets enabled. So we have the first set and the second set. As you can see, there's a percentage value in each of them. You can also display as fuel flow to get your actual pound per hour for each set. This one's on a blower car, so you can see that down at idle, he has most of the fuel coming through the second set. And then as RPM and boost increase, it becomes closer to a 50-50 spread. There's plenty of ways you can do this. We also have a twin turbo example. On the twin turbo, you can see we have a large table, pound per hour, conversion to VE. When you use the custom injectors, you can see that it starts with all of the fuel on the primary injector for idle, and as he comes towards two-step and coming into boost and launch, that it slowly ramps to 50-50. And if you view it as the second table, you can see that 0 on the second set, and it ramps up to 50. In the injector setup, we'll just look at what they are so you can see. Set 1 is a set of 500-pound injectors set at 75 psi with an 8 amp drive. It's used for prime shot, cranking fuel, and individual cylinder correction. Set 2 is equal sized injector. As the driver setup is blank because we're using an injector driver box, and it is only used for individual cylinder correction. And that's simply because we have 2 in the port. So individual cylinder correction is all we want because we're idling on one set of injectors. There's no need for using cranking fuel for both of them. One thing to show on the custom injectors is that we did keep the white area for if you exceed the injector set's ability. So each fuel set or each fuel table has its own max fuel volume that it can have. With 3 sets of injectors, you can have different size injectors. One set could be a 60-pound set, another set could be 500-pound. So it's very easy when using percentage to overrun one of the injectors and put it past 100% duty cycle. To help you guys with that, we added this to the new tables where if it exceeds max duty cycle of the injectors, it will turn white. So if we somehow manage to hit 87 pounds of boost and 7,500 RPM here, it'll run out of fuel and start to go lean. The first set of injectors is a read-only table. So this is just what's left after you decide how much fuel you want to put in the second and third set. So here we can change and adjust. One thing you could do is select a pound per hour that you want to go in this set as a whole. And you can see that displayed as fuel flow, displayed as a percent, it shows you how much, and it automatically did the math to say that 100% of the fuel flow of the base fuel table would be a lesser number than the 5,000 I entered. So we also have some logic in there to help you not exceed the base fuel table value. For the most part, that's the majority of the new stage injection tables. You can use it for blowers, stage injection on a turbo. One possible application would be dual fuel, where you have one set of injectors that are ran for pump gas, and then the second and or third are phased in with the first one phased out to run methanol. That's popular on some of your fast streetcar stuff. Getting into traction control, there's a lot new here. What we have is the new style called active speed management in the software. It's called time-based traction control when you order on the website. It is a paper feature, meaning you go to the website and buy a digital download and unlock code and enter it to the software to enable its function. The software is available. You can still use it, play with it, try it. It just won't pull timing or retard. It just won't pull timing or cut cylinders until you activate the feature. So you can go home, play with this anytime you want. The first thing you need to do is set up the drive shaft sensor or speed sensor. You can use any sensor that is a frequency or speed. Typical use will be a wheel speed sensor or a drive shaft sensor. Then there's the minimum and maximum drive shaft speed for activation. Those are simply your limits. You may not want it to activate under 200 RPM or over 5,000 RPM. That's just an easy way to disable it. The other is the timer ignore. That's just a time-based ignore. Perhaps you want to ignore it for the first 2/10 of the run. So that's, as you can see, how this tune is set up. The x-axis max time is what defines how the graph looks. So you can see the graph is 6 seconds long, and that is defined by the x-axis max time. From there you have the traction control tables. There are 3 tables used by the software to control power. There is a retard A, retard B, and a rev limit table. You can zoom on the graph to see each of them, and then you can drag dots up and down as needed. We'll get a little more into how to manipulate and look at stuff here in a minute. I want to get to a data log and show you what it looks like on the track. So here in the data log, there's a lot of new parameters to go along with the traction control. You have drive shaft timing offset, drive shaft rev limit, TC launch input, and then internal parameters that you can set up independently are drive shaft main, basically the table values from the tune. So this one, they're named DC, DS main rev, DS retard B, DS retard A. And that's simply the retard A, retard B, and the rev limit curves from the tune. We'll roll through the setup here together. We'll just set this to a 0 to 5500 for each of them. And then we'll actually move them all onto panel 3 so that we can see that with the actual drive shaft curve overlaid with each other. Everyone see that okay? So what you'll see in this log is the actual drive shaft is in purple here. The drive shaft curves from the calibration are here. And then up here we have TPS and engine RPM. You'll see that 0 time is set from the TC launch input, which is when you let go of the trans brake. And from there, it immediately started to spin the tire. So you see, drive shaft RPM gets up to 2,000 RPM. And at the point traction control starts to work, we'll turn on the drive shaft timing offset, which shows a 0 value, and then pulling 11 degrees. Then we'll turn on the drive shaft rev limit, and we'll see that it pulled 4 cylinders, which means it shut off 4 cylinders. It started to drag the engine RPM back, and the drive shaft RPM followed. What you'll see is TPS stayed 100% the entire time until after the tire was recovered and the driver felt something was weird in the car and decided to pedal long after the tire was already under control. Then out here you can see again, the tire comes up, goes past the line, and engine RPM dips. It starts to control the tire speed again. We have a video of this to show you what it looked like in real time. So you'll see the tire spins at launch, does 2 rotations, and comes back under control. It goes out, and you'll see where it spins again, it goes into shake, and it's trying to control that. So how we accomplish that is with these tables. What we do is we can import a drive shaft curve from any run by first opening the log, setting the 0 time, and then hitting the import log file. And what you'll see is the same thing we saw in the data log, where it exceeds the curves and comes back under and then exceeds them again. So what we do is the first thing you can do is you can right click on it and you can copy it to one of the curves. Usually you'll copy to base and use that as your baseline to make changes. The retard A is used as a step retard, meaning that as soon as you cross the retard A line with your actual drive shaft curve, it will step out an amount of timing you choose. In this tune, it steps out 3 degrees. And as soon as it crosses back under that line, if those 3 degrees were enough, it will put the timing directly back in. So it's on or off. There's no ramping on that curve. Retard B is a ramp out. It's an interpolation between the retard A and the retard B line. This means that if you 3 degrees don't stop it and the drive shaft curve keeps climbing and going above like it does here, we'll quickly ramp down to the 11 degrees of timing out. So it will first step to 3. If that doesn't stop it and drive shaft keeps going, it'll slowly pull more and more timing. If that doesn't work and you get past the retard B line, it will start dropping 1 cylinder. And as you continue towards the rev limit line, it will drop more cylinders up to 4 cylinders maximum. So the way that works is as this line came up, it dropped 3 degrees out, ramped to 11 degrees, and then dropped 1, 2, 3, and 4 cylinders by this point. So in the log, that happens very quickly, and you can see that it pretty much, as the traction control turns on, since it was already way above, it instantly goes to the full retard and 4 cylinders dropped. Again, when it comes out here, because of how the calibration is set up, you'll see that it drops 4 cylinders, then none, and it starts ramping the timing back in. So that is the retard right there. So it drops the 11 degrees out and it's starting to ramp it back in as drive shaft's coming under control, and more importantly, as he is ramping the timing out of the tune. So after 2.4 seconds, he doesn't allow the timing to come out anymore. So what this did is it saved an aborted run. He would have spun instantly off the hit, had to abort, and just drive down the track. This way, he was able to make a run. If you're in eliminations, that's the difference between going to the next round or going home. I have another example. This one is on a 275 tire with a nitrous car. We have a good run and then one with the traction control activated that we'd like to compare. So you can see in this run, the drive shaft curve comes up, hiccups here slightly. The drive shaft timing comes out, drags the motor backwards and brings it back in line. If we open up a comparison log, we can see what a good run would look like. You can see that the desired here, what it did the previous run without traction control, activating, and then the one where it tried to slip the tire, traction control saved it and brought it back, and made it basically an identical run. These runs, the time slip I believe was roughly 3/100ths different between the two. So you can see what he did was he had turned up the ignition timing on launch, and it was apparently a little too aggressive as the engine RPM got higher and flashed converter harder, and that was enough to start slipping the tire. But with a 14-degree retard, it was enough to drag the motor down and save the run. Again, it's the difference between going into spin, losing the round, or going to the next round. So this is a real good one where you can import the log file and you can see how he'd set up his tune. Where he's got, that appears to be the baseline there. Okay. So he set up the base curve to be roughly his run. He set up retard A up here, and what we'll do actually is we'll use the view deltas button to see what retard A is. So the base curve will copy the run. So what you do is you click the yellow dots, and you can either copy it to one of your graphs or you can offset it to one of your graphs. So this allows you to set up your tune. So for here we're going to copy to base just to make all the baseline match the run. From there we can go to retard A and hit the view deltas, and it will tell us what the difference is between the retard A curve and the baseline curve. This is useful for setting them up when you want to do, you may know, take a good run, load it in like this, and you'll know that you want to pull 3 degrees, say 50 RPM above that baseline. All you do is you would go in here, highlight everything and type 50. Oops, what the hell did I do there? So what that did is move the entire graph 50 RPM above the base. So what you'll see is it came through right here, came up, pulled timing, and came back down. You go back to the log, zoom in on that point, and just put it right in the middle there. When we go back here, side by side, it will highlight for us where we are in the table. So you can see that drive shaft had come above the lines, causing it to retard the maximum amount. So for reference, how much did we pull the timing down? Ignition timing was negative 3.6 degrees on that run to make that happen. That's something to be aware of with traction control, is how much you're retarding your timing. With a coil in your plug ignition, that's not nearly as big a concern, but if for those running distributors, rotor phasing can become an issue with traction control. If you're pulling 25 degrees on top of your launch retard to save the engine or save the run, you could end up jumping to the next cylinder and backfiring. The other thing on a nitrous car, speaking of that, is the rev limit curve drops cylinders. Sometimes people don't want to do that. Nitrous cars definitely don't want to do that. So we have a way to disable that in the software. If you go to the rev limit curve and set the entire curve to zeros, or any cell to 0, that disables it for that cell. So this being a nitrous car has the entire curve disabled. On a boosted car, perhaps you want the first second to have a value in it. So you might have something like that, where the first second of the run you allow it to drop cylinders and afterwards you don't. Very common that throughout the run you'll become less aggressive with the traction control as it's less likely to spin. This is kind of an ugly run, but still a good one to show. This is on a pro mod that I've worked with a couple times. He had changed a ton of stuff, had no idea what it was going to do. So we took a couple of okay runs, blended them together into a traction control curve, and kind of swung for the fence and hoped. So what ended up happening is drive shaft came up, whacked the traction control, kind of flatlined, recovered, touched it again, and then made the run. So it wasn't pretty, but instead of going into shake immediately or going up in smoke, we were able to make a run and start improving from there based on what the traction control told us. I don't have a good run after because I'm not that great with big tires and they're kind of hard to figure out sometimes. But as you can see, still saved a run and got us to keep going rounds and trying to improve. This one's from a low 4-second run on a drag radial twin turbo car on alcohol. This one I got a whole bunch going on. So we can see TPS is 100% the entire run. See engine RPM is fairly crazy here. You can see drive shaft speed comes up, gets out of control, and then comes back. So you see ignition timing comes out, drops down, engine RPM drops with it, drive shaft RPM flatlines, spikes a little and comes down. So the timing offset was 8 degrees. And the drive shaft rev limit cycle from 4 to 2 to 0, then came back up as the drive shaft spiked again to 1 cylinder, 2 cylinders, 1 cylinder, and then back to 0. So this was actually a fairly mild traction control setup. It allowed the tire to get away from it, held it, and then brought it back. So we'll walk through this one again as well. So here, the drive shaft curve is below all of them. Starts to spin, comes up, touches the retard A line here, which causes it to drop 2 cylinders out at that point, or 2 degrees out. It continues on and doesn't stop the spin, so it ramps down to a total of 8 degrees out. That does not stop it, so it starts dropping 1, then 2 cylinders. As you can see, it's between the rev limit line and the B, so it doesn't drop all 4. So it starts here with 1 cylinder, roughly this point is 2, and then that's enough to bring it down, and so it's going back to 1, then it comes up to 2 again. And here it stops spinning, comes down, so it goes to 0 cylinders and starts ramping timing back in. Now, I'm not sure how much it slowed it down on this run. I don't know what the target curve for the traction control was. But as you can see, because of the spin, when it came back under control, the drive shaft line is much below the curve, meaning that the run was probably slowed down significantly by it. But again, still not an aborted run. You still went down the track. If the guy in the other lane had issues, you just won when you wouldn't have. Or you would have been in a pedal fest, which is always interesting. One of the things you can do with these curves, if you have a really good run, perhaps your personal best, and you're on a track where you're just running against the traction control, repeating your best run, you might want to try to improve, but still use the safety net of traction control. We allow you to offset the curves quite easily. All you do is you check the curves that you want to change. You hit the offset button, and then you can either multiply, percent change, add whatever you want to it. So let's say you're bumping the traction control a little bit the entire run. You're pretty sure you can go a few percent faster in the 60 foot. You can take all these curves and just type 1.05 with the asterisk, and that should add 5% to the entire curve. So now you've got a little extra 5% margin to make your next run on without running into your traction control. Doesn't always work. Sometimes it's better to turn the traction control off in those situations, depending on how big a swing you're making at things. But again, if you want to use it as a safety net, it's there. We do also have, everything so far has been the drive shaft curve, and you're talking about drive shaft speed. We do also have the same feature for the crankshaft. So if you choose to, you can limit engine RPM through the run as opposed to drive shaft speed. Various reasons to use that. For the most part, I haven't seen people using it, but I really feel like there's got to be a scenario for it, so I wouldn't be afraid to try it on a couple cars. The one I see as a potential use for it is swapping a converter. You may not know what the new converter is going to do, but you know kind of what your engine RPM curve normally looks like. So if you think it may be way loose, you might restrain it using engine timing and perhaps the rev limiters to help hold it down and make sure you make a good run and evaluate the converter as opposed to just spinning and pulling power, spinning and pulling power to see where it ends up. One of the things with traction control is it requires an input to start the timer. Make sure when you're setting up traction control that you take your TC launch input and pin map it over to your trans brake input or whatever you're going to use to start the timer. We do also in V5 have a stage assist feature now that is available either as a duty cycle, which has a creep, or you can do it as a single pulse, which allows you to each bump or each press of the button moves the car once. To set up the drive shaft curves in your tune, you go to the input area and you can go set up an internal parameter. When you configure it, you'll go to the traction control, ASM, and you'll pick the curve you need for drive shaft. For drive shaft, rev limit, retard, or you can do the crankshaft. And as we said earlier, that takes what's in the tune and puts it in the data log for you so you can overlay them without having to go back and forth between tune and log. So what we can do is just look at it right in the data log here and see, same thing we saw in the tune. It comes up, passes retard A and B, gets in the middle between retard B and the rev limit curve, and then slowly comes back under control. And as soon as it gets under and starts putting the timing back in and puts all the cylinders back in, it starts to spin again and requires some more cylinder drop. One thing I did want to kind of show you guys that we don't have released yet, but are working on here, is a new comparison feature. What this will do is allow you to take your current tune you have open and compare it to others that you may have on your laptop. Yeah, this is some of the secret stuff that's on there. So what you'll see on this is, as I loaded in this second tune, a bunch of these turn bold, which means there's differences within them between the current tune, my radial TC tune, and my new tune I just loaded in. As you open up the tree views, you'll see bold is different, plain is the same. So this one, because the bass fuel tables are a different size, it won't let me compare them. There'll be some things like that throughout the comparison. Let me open up a different one here. There we go. So what you see is the bass tune that I've had open, as well as the comparison tune overlaid with each other. You'll see the bass tunes axis are here in gray, with the comparison axis next to it, along with a heat map to show the difference between them. You can show the base table's fuel value, the comparison's fuel value, the delta between them, or a percent difference between them. Same with the axis values. This will just be the sections over here. And then you can also turn the heat mapping off, or you can customize it. Oh, those are big differences apparently. There we go. You'll be able to do that throughout any and all of these. Target air fuel ratio. Things like Excel enrichment will show just a color, blue or red, blue being, in this case, being a lower value, red or higher value, and red being a lower value. Another thing you will be able to do is you can copy those things over to your base table. So if I want to take this calibration, my MPI 36SB, and take the fuel table and put it in my current tune, all I would do is hit the copy to base, and now they are the same. If I go back to my base fuel table, it's now a lot less fuel. Those will come in real handy on traction control as well, because you'll be able to easily compare a couple different tunes, perhaps for a slow track, fast track, difference in gear change perhaps, things like that. Really, I went through that a lot faster than I thought I would. About out of things, so really, if anyone, would you like to do a Q&A for the rest of the time, or?
I'm just now getting into the traction control, but
yeah.
When you showed the actual going up to the first, the A, and then through the S to B, let's say that's a consistent run for you every time. Could you gradually get your A's and B's further up to catch it, so it didn't exceed that, caught it quicker? Is that what you're typically would?
So you're basically asking if it's not really spinning but running into the curve?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be a pretty good scenario for using the offset curves. You might just take retard A and B, and increase them by 5%. Or you could do an amount, if you think it's 25 RPM, you could just add 25 RPM to the whole table. And that gives you an extra 25 RPM or 5% or however you want to do the math. Yes, sir.
Injector setup.
Yes.
A couple of quick questions. When you were adjusting the percentage of fuel flow between the two sets of graphs, will it automatically, if you say injector set one, you want it 50 or 20%, will it automatically grab 80% when the other injector set, or do you have to manually enter that?
So on the custom injectors, right now it's 50-50. You're saying if I take and change set 2 to 80, what happens to set 1?
Sure.
So if I type in 80 here, it will automatically on set 1 change it to 20.
Okay.
So the math is there and the magic's there that we always add up to 100% of the base table. There's no way you can end up under or over.
And one other question on that, if I could. You were showing that you have to run a driver on the second set. Well, what if I'm running two sets of high impedance and I want to stage those in? Do I have to have a driver for a second set, or is that driver really needed for the bigger injectors with the A2?
So when using the custom injection type, we do require an injector driver box for the second and third set. And that's simply because we don't have enough on board to run them sequentially.
Okay. So it's regardless of injector, high impedance, amperage requirement?
Correct. Yeah, there's the benefit of the injector driver box definitely shows in the higher amperage injectors, but it is just due to our current hardware design required, unfortunately, for even a high impedance.
Thank you.
Yep. Now that's not to say using older methods, using the duty cycle activation, what's been available since V1 through V4, you can use a high impedance injector on that using the internal drivers. There's no driver box required for those. It's only with the new method available in V5 that requires the injector box. Just for the second set, yes. Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes. Yes, if you have a 4L80 electronic transmission that's controlled through the EFI, you can use that as one of your inputs, and the table values will become mile an hour versus RPM. We automatically do that math for you as the table changes. You just use, instead of 5,000 drive shaft RPM, you'd use 120 mile per hour in the table. Yes, sir.
Cylinder deactivation, is it spark, fuel, or both?
On the traction control, when we drop cylinders, it is spark only, and as part of that, we turn off closed loop if it is on, so that you don't start ratcheting up closed loop inaccurately. So part of that means you should make sure that your fuel tune and your closed loop correction is at or near 0 before really leaning on the traction control. Otherwise, if you're adding 20% of fuel and it goes into cylinder cut, suddenly you'll be 20% lean, which is a bad combo.
I think I saw you do a, like for different globals, and you have different catalog config files. Did I see you do a data?
Yeah. Yeah, so in data logs, so right here I just set up these configs for PRI here, and what you do with that is you can change and move all your stuff around. You know, you can delete all these and just throw a couple things on. And you can go File, Save As, and just save it under a name. Hit Save. And you can open it back up. So if you have different customers, like if you're a shop, I know you're a tuner, if you have 10 customers with 10 different input setups and a bunch of different data to look at on each of them, you can set up your data logger for each of them, save it as a graph file under their name or however, whatever method you choose, and just swap between them. So, and then also you can save it to a USB drive and take it from computer to computer to computer. So, and what we do in V5 actually, we added a twin turbo setup and a nitrous setup in addition to the default data log setup. So those have, like the twin turbo one has the stage injection application stuff in it. The nitrous one obviously has all your different nitrous stages, timers, dry fuels, and stuff already set up in it. Yes, sir.
On the traction control, you had set up for retard A is 50.
Mhm.
On there, what would you recommend that as a base to go to first?
Dealer's choice. I'm certainly not an expert, and I've done it on 5 million cars, but what I've seen working quite well, at least as a base point, is on a radial specifically, would be a retard A, somewhere very tight to what you want it to run, 10, 50 RPM. Retard B, a similar amount above it, so 10 to 50 RPM. And then what I have liked to do is take the rev limit line and actually put it about 200 to 300 RPM above the retard B line. That way it has some room to actually drop 1, 2, 3 instead of just going straight to 4. And then alternatively, there is another way I didn't show, where you take the retard A line and you put it on what you actually want the run to be instead of slightly above it. But you set the retard to 0 so that it doesn't pull timing. And then you use the retard B curve to actually just interpolate and pull timing out linearly, as opposed to a small step first. So there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat on this one, and by no means is one necessarily more correct than the other. Some cars will require 2 degrees of timing to get them under control. Some will require 15, maybe more. So it's you throw something in there and you try it, and you just roll with it. You'll see the results right away if it worked or not. Yes, sir.
Could you put retard A as below it as a positive? You're trying to target an ET.
We do not add power in any way, shape, or form, so we can only pull timing.
Thank you.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Drive shaft sensor on the pinion.
Mhm.
You run like a magnet system, like 8 magnets, or would you run a reductor wheel with a lot more segments in it?
Basically, anything works. Within reason, the more triggers per rotation, the better. Commonly, you'll see anywhere from 8 to 16 right now. There's a couple that are up to 32. My personal opinion on that is that after the first half second of the run, all those extra teeth probably aren't doing a ton of extra good. It's only at low speed does that extra resolution potentially help you. Yes.
Since you're, no, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
How do you activate traction control after you get the email confirmation?
So to activate the traction control after, well, let's start at the very beginning, really. You go to the website, you give us some money, we send you an email, and that email is a link. The link will ask you for the serial number of your ECU. You enter the serial number for your ECU, and we print out this gigantic, long string of characters. What you do from there is you put the active traction ICF in, and you put that long string of characters right here, and you can see it's long. All you do then is you load this tune to your ECU, cycle the power, and then I can't do it because I'm not hooked to an ECU, but under this one there's a option called Get Extended ECU Info, and that will have in it, as part of the information, the very bottom one will say traction, and it'll say either activated or not activated. It should say activated after you've sent a tune with the proper key put in it. And the only caveat to that is if you do a firmware update, you will need to re-enter that key. So you should just be reloading your tune with the key already in it, so you never really notice. But in the potential case that you load a tune without traction control, it won't be active until you do. Yes, sir.
The key is ECU specific.
Yes, it locks to the ECU. Okay.
Give us a different key if we kill the ECU.
Certainly something we can work with you on. Yeah, we don't want to leave you hanging high and dry on something like that.
Why would you kill the ECU?
I've done it once.
I'm sure it was the wiring. Now, I'd like to just take a moment actually now, and Tom Keiss is here. He does all of our training. I'd like to give him a moment to talk and tell you about what we have to offer in that regard.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yep.
I know. I wouldn't expect any less of you. So, I actually see a lot of familiar faces in here, so I always like asking you a question. Raise your hand if you've actually spent some time with me in training, if you're in this room with me today. It's pretty good. What I'd like to see next year is a lot more of y'all have your hands raised. A lot of people aren't aware that Holley actually offers factory direct Holley EFI training classes. So the majority of those classes are hosted in our hometown of Bowling Green, Kentucky. We offer 3 tiers of training. The Tier 1 class is a one-day class. In 2019, it's going to have a cost of $199. It's going to be a class that even if you have Holley experience to complete the other classes, you will need to start with Tier 1. It's going to cover system overviews. We discuss more of a plug-and-play type of installation with basic ignition types, general tuning, software navigation, help files. Kind of get your feet wet with Holley. If you've got Holley experience, I guarantee that if you come in even in a Tier 1 class, I get guys say, oh, I don't need that. They come in, I guarantee you're going to learn at least one thing. That'll be a benefit. If you don't learn anything that you didn't know, what it's minimum it's going to do is it's going to reinforce your understanding of the Holley system to that point. The Tier 2 class is a 2-day class. Cost in 2019 is $299. A good way to look at Tier 1 into Tier 2. Tier 1, we kind of identify that there's a rabbit hole in the ground. When we get into Tier 2, we climb down into it. We get in depth into custom ignition types, inputs and outputs, more in-depth tuning and engine operation in theory, some advanced tables, trans control, drive-by-wire. We kind of get way down into weeds with that class. The Tier 3 class, as well as 2 days, cost that's $299 as well. And we get into the power adder side of it. Nitrous controls, boost control, the active speed management, water meth, and some more in-depth discussions. Probably moving into 2019, shifting more of the advanced table stuff into those classes. The classes will be held at the Corvette Museum. So if any of you guys have taken classes before that haven't been at the Corvette Museum, you know it gets a little crowded at Holley. Those of you that have taken class at Corvette Museum with me, there's a lot more room. Get a little more people in there. It's definitely a lot more comfortable environment. I do offer a Holley plant tour. It used to be mixed in with the Tier 1 class. If you come into 2019, that plant tour will be hosted the day before Tier 1 classes only. It'll start at noon. I'll meet everybody at Holley in the lobby. I'll send out an email about it where people can RSVP. It's limited class sizes, so I limit the class size to 15 to 20 people. It's definitely not because I'm limited on space, but I feel that if you get much more than 15 to 20 people, I kind of lose that one-on-one connection. There's a certain amount of information I'm going to cover regardless within those classes, but by keeping the class size small, it does allow us to kind of deviate and get down some different avenues. Some of you guys have been in class and we've had some pretty interesting discussions that get way down there in the weeds and a little bit off topic. And I'm always usually available to try to stay late a little bit if we can, or come in early for things that we may not be able to cover throughout that class. But it allows you to kind of get more of a one-on-one type of experience. One of the things I do suggest people do, if you know that you're coming in for the class, and there's some things that you may be having some difficulties on, you're not really grasping, it's kind of over your head a little bit, bring a list, because one of the first things I'm going to ask you being in the class is, do you have experience with Holley EFI? And is there anything in here particular that you want to learn? If you say, I just want to learn everything, that's great. But if you say, yeah, I've been dealing with this, but I'm fighting idle issues or transmission problems, I can't get this traction control stuff figured out, that'll help me know when we get into that area of class to make a little bit better eye contact and see how kind of deer in the headlights look you're getting, if you're getting or not, and work with it. We'd love to have you in for training. Personally, I feel that it's an invaluable experience that'll be well worth your time and your trip. West Coast guys, in the past we've done some classes at EFI University. I have already released the 2019 schedule. I've had some folks ask about that. We've actually had some difficulties filling those classes. 2019, it is not on the schedule yet, but I will be adding a Tier 1 and Tier 2 class, not a Tier 3. But Tier 1 and 2 class that'll be the week following LS Fest West. So if there's any West Coast guys that want to get in for Tier 1 and 2, we will have that available as well. And again, that class seating is going to be limited. For 2019, all class registrations are going to be handled online. So in the past, from you guys, it's a crazy email and phone tag game that I've played. It's been really difficult to schedule classes in 2019. You can do it right now on your cell phone. You just go to Holley's website, holley.com, go under support training events. It will show you the calendar. It will show you what seats are remaining that are available. And it's got a register now link. You click on it, you can select the classes you want to attend. If you're scheduling it for more than one person, when you process the registration, you will get an email with a link that you can go in and update their names. There'll also be a link on there for all your travel information, directions, maps, some local hotels that have discounts. So it'll streamline that. So I'm sure some of you guys have taken classes. Raise your hand if we've played phone tag for weeks and months to try to get you scheduled. Yeah. So we've eliminated a lot of that. So a lot of times I take names and stuff here and try to schedule and get back with your credit card information. We're not going to do that anymore. It just makes it easier on everybody. Also, I don't like having people's credit card information wrote down on paper. I'm not going to sell it to somebody, but you know, things wrote down, things on, so it just keeps that security in there a little bit better. I do have some schedules with me for people that are interested. The classes, as some of you guys are aware, if you try to get in, they sell out quick, and they're already selling out fast. A lot of the classes all the way up into April are already sold out. So, yeah, quick overview of the classes. Any questions on class-based stuff?
Is it any like hands-on, or is it just classroom?
It's more classroom-based environment to mix. It would be awesome if I had an engine we could strap on a dyno and tie up a whole dyno cell at Holley and deal with that. I would love it. Yeah, if you guys can get upper management to secure the budget to do that for me, dude, I will be right there. Sign me up. The Tier 1 class, we do some stuff on a running engine. I got just the LM753 truck motor on the run stand. For the guys that, you know, show you things would learn, how learn and closed loop work, some AE correction, some of the stuff, how rev limiters respond, and some of the reaction, the differences between that. The Tier 3 class, one of the biggest things that people face as a challenge with a lot of the boosters, like our boost controller, is the PID tuning. And there's some boost controls out there that are they are what they are, and a lot of people don't use data acquisition. Data's king. There's no such thing as too much data, and they just don't see how well it really responds. So I could talk about PIDs and draw stuff on a board all day long. You're not going to get it. So some of my explanations I break down into things people understand, like spring rates, that. But I actually built a simulator essentially that I can simulate every normal input or output that an engine would have in conjunction with the ECU. So we can even create safety scenarios if you guys have questions. But through the Tier 3 class on boost control, we actually go through the room, and I have a fun exercise. I got 2 big screen TVs. And I turn one where one guy can't see it, and I put somebody in the hot seat after I showed you and taught some things on it. And the guy that's in the hot seat has to tell the guy that's looking at the other TV he can't see that screwed all the numbers up. Cause and effect based on what he sees in the strip chart. It's the same stuff you're going to deal with real time in the field, bench testing. So we do through some of that exercise. So some of you guys, how many guys have been through Tier 3? How many of you guys had a better grasp on PIDs when you left? Now PIDs just don't deal with boost control, do they? It's things you fight with idle, with IAC hunt and oscillation, where you got the generic slow, medium, and fast. I don't know how deep you guys gotten into software. There's also a section under custom. A nice little window pops up in a more professional way. It says, dude, if you don't know what the hell you're doing, stay out of here. But you'll see PIDs. Same thing in the advanced control for O2 sensor transport delay for things that have closed loop hunt. Once you grasp PIDs and have a better understanding of them and how they work, you'll start to see things all throughout vehicle operation and even daily life stuff that's PID control. It's going to have a lot of things make sense if you need to get down in the weeds and some deeper programming within some of the systems. So I do as much hands-on as I can, but no, I don't have a dyno to work with. That answered your question on that. Any questions?
I forgot to ask at the beginning how many have used traction control or in the stage injection. I'll have to ask them.
How many?
So we got to wrap up here real quick, but I did want to ask, I forgot to at the beginning, how many of you have actually used our traction controller, the new stage injection, before today? Cool. Awesome. Our time's up right now, but I mean, we're available here if you guys want to just talk out in the hall or have more questions. Thanks everyone for coming. Appreciate it.